little squabble. I don't know if you saw that sound bite. I read your op-ed piece, and I understand that the president gets very colloquial at times, but in your view, this is anything but a little squabble.
Yeah, Joe, I think what's interesting is that in your co-host for this hour, Tom Friedman, can tell you that I think it was almost 2 years ago to the week that Tom came back from Beijing, came to the West Wing of the White House, and we sat in my small office we called the War Room, just down from the Oval Office, and had this exact same discussion. China has been running an economic war. If I talked in CNBC at your conference last summer and the many times I've been on here, China's been running an economic war against the industrial democracies for now 20 years. And eventually, when the companies, as Tom laid out in his op-ed piece this week, when the companies stopped making money, people realized with Made in China 2025, One Belt, One Road, and Huawei's 5G rollout, this is a master plan to become an economic hegemon. This is why that 175 to 200-page contract wasn't really about the trade aspects of it. It really wasn't about how many soybeans they're going to buy, et cetera. The fundamental parts were to go into these deep verticals of state capitalism and demand transparency and accountability, to demand monitoring and enforcement. And that's why when the Chinese finally woke up, after 9 months of negotiating with President Trump and Bob Lighthizer, they refused and basically walked away from the deal because they understood that they've been running an economic war in this, that this is not a trade deal. This is a truce and an economic war, an armistice, so to speak, and that they weren't prepared to do it. And I think you've seen over the last 48 hours what their response has been in trying to jack up the hyper-nationalism. But as Tom Friedman ended his column, this is not a front-page business story. This is history in real time. It's the most significant thing that any president could possibly do. This cuts to the core of what the United States is going to be in the future and what our geostrategic relationship is going to be with China.
Well, that sounds like when we talk about the stock market, we have analysts give us near-term, intermediate-term, and long-term projections. And I think we need to break this down into that as well, because long-term, it seems like this is going to go on for years, but there's going to be near-term developments that are going to be required by whoever's watching this. We're going to need to know something within the next month or as the election comes closer in 2020. We're going to need some type of agreement, some type of understanding to talk more later, because with what you're presenting to me, Steve, it looks like a lose-lose. I don't see how China ever would agree to what we need them agree to get a real trade deal.
I disagree with this. I think it actually will be a win-win. The system that China has, particularly the slave labor they have now in the Chinese population, this is about this radical cadre in the CCP. You cannot possibly have this totalitarian surveillance state. It can't exist. You have the industrial democracies, okay? What we're trying to do, and I think what Trump is trying to do very thoughtfully, is to bring them into really a world system, a system that Tom Friedman and others have talked about. The problem is we allowed the City of London, Wall Street, and the corporatists to create a system that worked for them and didn't work for working class people, whether those people are in Ohio or Michigan or Wisconsin or here in Germany. This is why Donald Trump's president of the United States, it was as J.D. Vance points out, it's the sending of the factories to China, the loss of the jobs, and the importation of the opioids because of this crisis of kind of angst that has developed this crisis in the upper Midwest. That's why Joe Biden kicked off his campaign in Pittsburgh. People understand that this is where the presidential election of 20 is going to be decided. It is where the presidential election in 16 was decided. This can be a win. The Chinese business model cannot continue, and it won't continue. You can stop it by stopping the forced technology transfers, allowing the intellectual property and industrial espionage to stop, and stop financing it. We have full capabilities in the West to stop this right now and help China evolve into a real industrial power along rules, the rule of law, and everything that they've agreed to for 20 years that they haven't played by. Not just not played by, done the exact opposite. And I think it's now time for people to stop harping. You know, the fear project, particularly the Wall Street cheerleaders and their pom-poms, the fear project didn't work. The stock market didn't implode. The U.S. economy didn't implode. In fact, with Trump's trade policies, we're getting a boost now from trade. Import prices are dropping. Employment's up. So now they're going to go to the farmers. They're going to try the fear project by the Wall Street junta and the corporatists are going to try to take President Trump off of this very focused approach he has to really bring the world together in peace and prosperity.
Steve, I guess my point about it being lose-lose, I don't know how we could expect